In this video we're going to look at 50 words to describe the epic and sometimes tragic journey of the Irish language from before the 7th century right up to the 20th century. Some people have asked about subtitles in my videos. All my videos have subtitles, but you have to switch them on. Make sure you switch on English subtitles if you would like to enjoy those. So anyway, back to this video on 50 words to describe the journey of the Irish language. Our first word is teanga. That's language, teanga. And Irish is of course a language of European descent, so it's a European language. Uirpeach is the Irish for European, Uirpeach. Irish is part of the Celtic family of languages, along with Scottish Gaelic and Welsh. The Irish for Celtic is Celtish, Celtish. And of course, Irish is a very ancient language. Orsa is the Irish for ancient, Orsa. The language can be traced back to before the 7th century. An Seachtú Céad, the 7th century. An Seachtú Céad. Old is another word for Irish. Sean is the Irish for old, Sean. Ní Sinne is older, and Is Sinne is oldest. Sean, Ní Sinne, and Is Sinne. Indeed, Irish is so old, it's said to be the oldest written European language north of the Alps. Irish is also a mother tongue to two other languages still around today. The Irish for mother tongue is Máthair Theanga. Máthair Theanga. Because Scottish Gaelic and Manx Gaelic originate from Irish. So the Irish for Scottish Gaelic is Gaeilge na hAlban. Gaeilge na hAlban. And the Irish for Manx Gaelic is Gaeilge Vannin. Gaeilge Vannin. So Scottish Gaelic is spoken mainly in the west and northwest of Scotland. Alban is Scotland, Alban. And although the Manx language was extinct for many years, it is undergoing a little bit of a revival at the moment. The Irish for Isle of Man is Ilan Vannin. Ilan Vannin. The Irish language is a very poetic language. Phileta is the Irish for poetic, Phileta. And an example of that can be seen in these two words. The Irish for a ladybird is Bohín Day. Bohín Day, and that literally translates into God's little calf. Another example of the poetic nature of Irish is the description of wolf. A wolf is known as Mac Tíre. Mac Tíre. So Mac is son and Tíre refers to the country, so it literally means the son of the land. Irish, like all languages, has changed and evolved over the years. So the Irish for change is ahru, ahru, and the Irish for developing or evolving is ag ferbert, ag ferbert. Languages have to do this. All languages do so. That's how they thrive and survive over time. They pick up dialects, they pick up loan words, and they lose dialects and loan words. And this happens all the time. An town ar fad, all the time. An town ar fad. For example, when the Normans came to Ireland in 1169, na Normannig, the Normans, na Normannig, the Irish language adopted some words from Norse. So for example, the Irish for penny is pingin, pingin, and the Irish for a magistrate is giústish, giústish. So they were both taken and adopted from the Normans. Irish continued to be widely spoken throughout the 1600s and the 1700s. But as the 1800s drew closer, that would be the 19th century, an naoú céad déag, the 19th century, an naoú céad déag, it was clear that the status of the Irish language was going to be coming under pressure. There had been a series of rebellions and uprisings in Ireland, the most recent one being the 1798 rebellion. So Britain was looking to increase its grip on Ireland. So grime is grip, grime. It was looking to exert more control, smacht, control, smacht. So although Irish was reasonably widely spoken, lámhairthe spoken, lámhairthe, there were problems ahead. Ire is a useful little phrase. It means throughout or during the course of. So for example, Ire an neu cé déag means throughout the 19th century. Ire an neu cé déag. So throughout the 19th century, the Irish language would face many challenges and many difficulties. So the Irish for a challenge or a difficulty is dúthláin, dúthláin. And many challenges is go leor dúthláin, go leor dúthláin. Because Irish would be constantly and continuously ostracised and isolated by the powers that be. Imilethe means isolated, imilethe. In terms of education and the church, for example, let's start with the church. The Irish for the Catholic Church is an Aglish Chatlicoch, an Aglish Chatlicoch. They never embraced or promoted the use of Irish. They preferred people to be speaking in English. And in any case, Latin was the language of the church at the time, so they had little interest in preserving the Irish language. And that is a shame, because a lot of Irish people at the time would have looked to the Catholic Church for guidance, and they would have had a lot of respect at that time. But another area where the Irish language was coming up against insurmountable obstacles was in the area of education. Idicus is education. Idicus. It wouldn't have been unusual at the time, throughout the 1800s that is, for Irish children, that's those that could afford to go to school, for them to be studying English and French, but not Irish. Irish was pretty much banned from the curriculum. The powers that be didn't want people speaking or learning Irish. You might find this surprising, but there was more chance of Irish students learning Latin and Greek than there was learning their own native language. As the 1800s wore on, the middle classes, and the Irish for middle classes is an bhean acma, an bhean acma. The middle classes were embracing English more and more. English was becoming the language of business, trade, and just general administration. The Irish for administration is rirachán, rirachán. Irish was seen as being backwards or primitive. Coolanta is backwards, coolanta. It was seen as being worthless. Ganva, ganva is worthless. Because people at the time, because Ireland was such a poor country with very few opportunities, deisina opportunities, deisina, emigrating was one of the main things that people did in order to survive. And more often than not, they were emigrating to the likes of Canada, Boston and New York, where English was the predominant language. So emigrating is immerke and opportunities is deisina. That's why people were turning away from Irish and embracing English at the time. As we approached the mid-1800s, a tragic event was about to unfold. The Irish for tragic is tobisteach, tobisteach. And that event was the Great Famine. There's two ways to describe the Great Famine. You could say an gurta mór, which means the big hurt or the great hurt, or you could say an drochail, which means the bad life or the bad times. The famine lasted from 1845 to approximately 1849, and during that time 1 million people died and a further 1 million emigrated. It had a devastating effect on the Irish language and on the population in general. The Irish for population is daonra, daonra, and the Irish for sudden or abrupt is gotubban, gotubban. So you could say this, hit on daonra gotubban. The population fell drastically, or the population fell suddenly. Hit on daonra gotubban. The famine adversely affected Irish speakers more because they would have been poorer people in the west and south. The Irish for west is iarthar, iarthar, and the Irish for south is deisceart, deisceart. The Irish for turning is casa, casa. So casa an chéad is the turning of the century, casa an chéad. By the turning of the century, things were beginning to look a little more positive. There was a little more hope in the air in relation to the Irish language. Dóchas is hope. dóchas, because there was a revival movement going on in relation to all things Irish and Gaelic. So there was a renewed interest in the language as well as literature and Gaelic games. Conradh na Gaeilge was founded around the turn of the century. Conradh na Gaeilge, that's Irish for the Gaelic League. And they saw it upon themselves to promote and re-energise the Irish language by spreading it around the country and doing classes and the like. This had a positive effect in terms of people had a sort of a reawakening towards the language. So, bhuascail siad means they awoke or they realised. Bhuascail siad. They realised that they had this precious resource right on their doorstep and it was in danger of being lost forever. As the 1900s progressed, independence eventually came in 1922. Navsplachas is independence. Navsplachas. So finally Ireland could have a government of its own. The Irish for government is rialtas. Government. Rialtas. The Irish language has certainly had an interesting journey. It has survived so much. Numerous wars, one of the worst famines in human recorded history, the horrors of colonialism, even its own people turning its back on it. So having thought about those things over the last few days as I was preparing for this video, I've come to the following conclusion. If the Irish language can survive all of that, it can pretty much survive anything. So thank you for watching and I'll be back very soon. Slán tamil.